Hello there, I'm Paul. Thanks for joining me for this look around the PA34 multi-engine aircraft, which is a Piper Seneca. Just before we begin, this is one of two PA34s that are owned by Ravenair Flying School, based at Liverpool, and that's where I'm training at the moment for my instrument rating. And I'd just like to say beforehand, I'm not sponsored in any way by them, but I would highly recommend them for any of your training needs. So yeah, it's, hopefully you will find this useful. I could go on in great detail about many of the different things, but I've tried to keep it brief as much as I can do, just for anyone who's interested in seeing around and a look at what the various instruments do. So I'll leave it there for now. Hope you enjoy the video, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now. Okay, so here's a quick look at the controls and flying instruments in the twin engine PA34 on a very windy day. So first of all, we've got over at the left, we've got the magnetos. It's split, so there's the two for the left engine and there's two for the right engine, so that there's some contingency if one fails. The magnetos are basically going to cause the spark to ignite the fuel vapours. Moving over, there's the left and right start, engine start, and also primer. Below that, there's the light controls, so you've got the landing lights, left and right, two lights there, and then there's the navigation lights, which are the green and red lights. There's the anti-collision lights, and the pitot heat, which is for the pitot probe, which is gives us the airspeed indication. Okay, then you've got the fuel pumps left and right over to this side, with two settings for low and high. We don't usually use those under normal circumstances. Below there, we've got the battery master, which is the main master switch for the electrics in the aircraft. And then over to the bottom there, we've got the alternators, the left alternator and the right, again, so there's some contingency there. And then we can actually dim the lights there on that switch. Moving on to the control column. There you've got the trim, so we can trim it, have a pitch forward or pitch back, elevator trim. There's the red Autopilot disconnect button there, if we need to disconnect that. There's a press to talk for communications on the left there, and then control wheel steering, which basically holds a particular position on the control column there, and we can disconnect that with the hold it with that, or disconnect with that as well. Control column, pitch forward, push forward, and that pitches the nose down, and to pull back, that pitches the nose up. And then left and right, that controls roll left or right through the ailerons, and the pulling back and pushing forward, that controls the elevators. Okay, so moving along to the top, we've got the airspeed indicator there, and we've got a clock over to the left. Below that, we've got the turn coordinator, which gives us an indication of roll left and right as the aircraft rolls there, and then there's also a ball in the middle, which tells us that the aircraft's in balance. Moving over, we've got the Aspen control, which is when it's on, and I'll show you a little bit about that, but that basically is an electronic LCD display, which gives the pilot flying display, which gives us an indication of all of the main primary instrumentation is displayed on there of what we need to fly. And that's the primary method, and it shows all of the information that's in all of the analog dials that you see as well. Moving over, we've got the blue one there is the attitude indicator, which can show us whether we're pitching upwards or pitching down, and also will show roll and shows the degrees of roll on there as well. Next we've got the OBI, which is a navigation device, which we can set as well, which can show heading and whether we're on course either laterally or vertically for an instrument landing system for the glide slope, and also for tracking other navigation instruments called VORs. Below that we've got the altimeter, which is very important because that's there's different settings on there, so you need to make sure you're on the correct setting to make sure that we know where we are in relation to ground or terrain. Then over to the right we've got the Adf Needle, and again that's a navigation device, so we can have that if we're tuned into a particular navigation aid. That needle will point to the actual nav aid, so we can use that to show where we are in relation to that navigation aid, and that's used commonly for holds, so that we can work out exactly where we are in the hold and navigate around it. Over at the top you've got the basically a warning lights and an annunciator panel, and we've got a test switch there so we can show whether the engines are over boosting, and various different things as well. And then over to the right there you've got the trim switches and the Autopilot master switch at the top. Then we've got the control communications panel. I will go over these in more detail individually, but this is just a basic summary of what we've got. So that controls the navigation aid, communications, and basically our verbal communications as well, where we can use the switches to select different tune frequencies. Below that is the Garmin, and that's the main navigation and flight planning system that does various different things. It will show where we are on a moving map, and we would load a flight plan into that computer basically, and load procedures into it also. Below that we have the Garmin Nav2 Com2 control panel, so we'd have different frequencies controlled into there. We'd also have radio communications frequencies and nav aid frequencies tuned into this one, and we also have the secondary ones can be tuned into here, and we'd use backup navigation aids there in case we had a failure on one of the ones here. We'd have another channel that we could use. And then below that we've got the DME distance, so that will give us, this will be tuned into a particular navigation aid, and that will give us a distance measuring equipment, DME distances from that particular nav aid, so we know exactly where we are in relation to it, and we'd use that for different procedures as well. Moving down below there, we've got just behind these engine instruments, or engine control panel I should say, we've got the icing equipment. So we've got surface de-ice there, which will control boots on the wing and also the tailplane, and we would inflate those once they're actually showing a certain amount of ice to break that ice off the surfaces. We've also got a wing ice light there, and wing tail de-ices indication, and then the amps showing that we've got the electrics to heat the electric parts, and then windshield panel icing as well, and prop de-icing as well. Moving down the panel, so behind the control column we've got certain instrumentation there. So we've got the amps showing on the left, we've got cylinder head temperature next, we've got oil temperature, oil pressure, and also the fuel indication as well. So those would generally, we check those to check that they're within the green operating ranges, and to show that we're not showing anything high, which could be an indication of potential engine failure to come. So those are the ones for the left engine, and then also we've got the same ones also for the right engine as well. Below that we've got the different RPM gauges for the left and the right engine, and then we've got manifold pressure as well for the two engines are showed on the one display in the centre as well. So the two on the outside will show, one will be for the left engine there over to the left, and the one on the right is for the right engine, and they show the RPM of the actual propellers, and the middle one is the actual power that the engine's producing, and there's two needles there, one would be for the left and one for the right, but they're shown on the same instrument. Moving over to the right, we've got the landing gear indicating lights. So these would show green is what we're checking for, to check that the landing gear is actually in place. So we want to check that we've got 3 greens there, so that's the nose wheel and also the 2 main gear wheels as well. And then we've also got the landing gear operating wheel here, this lever, which is actually shaped purposely as a shape of a wheel, so that you can feel that that's the correct thing as well. And then below that we've got the emergency landing gear deployment lever as well, which we'd uncatch and follow a procedure before deploying that, which basically dumps the hydraulic fuel, which would mean that the undercarriages would automatically drop down with gravity and should lock into place. Below that we've got the parking brake lever, which we can apply, and also there's the brakes, the toe brakes and the rudder controls underneath as well. We'd also have manifold pressure drains underneath there, which we would use and check. So we would drain those for 5 seconds as part of the checks when we're actually starting as well. Coming down from the icing, just so where you can see, we've got each of these levers. We've got the left engine and the right engine, and these are the main throttles. Moving over to the middle there, we've got again left engine and right engine, and these are the prop mixture controls, or sorry, prop pitch controls for the individual propellers, and that will actually change the propeller RPM. And then moving over to the right there, we've got the actual fuel mixture control as well, which we would adjust with altitude as the pressure changes, so therefore the amount of oxygen in a particular unit of air reduces with altitude as the pressure decreases. So we would actually change those so they would be as a rich mixture to start off with on the ground, and then they would lean them off as well with climbs. And again, that would be one of the checks for coming into land. We'd be checking that those mixtures are rich and the props are fully fine as well, in anticipation of any potential go around, so we've got maximum power. We've got various warning lights as well, so we've got a low volts warning on the left, we've got 2 starter warning lights on the right hand side, and those are really critically important for part of the procedure for starting the engine, that you would check that those are out. Again, there's one for the left and one for the right. If one of those is remaining on when you start that engine, then it needs to be switched off straight away to prevent causing damage. Below that we've got the carbon monoxide detector, which we'd check as part of the engine checks, just checking for any dark spots on there, which could show that potentially we've got exhaust gases leaking into the cabin, which would be obviously an emergency in its own right. And then you've got the Avionics master switch on the left hand side, which controls the power for the Avionics. We would switch that off when we're starting the engine, just to prevent any damage through power surges, etc. Below that we've got the Autopilot control panel, and that controls the various autopilot settings. Below that we've got the Adf Control Panel, so that's basically going to control non-directional beacons, the NDBs. So we would control that with setting options for 2 of those controls, which is again a nav aid, which corresponds to this instrument here. And then below that we've got the Garmin, which is basically that controls the squawk codes that we would be given for various different parts of flight, basically so that ATC can see where we are on their radar screens. So we can tune in a particular code, and also we can tune in emergency codes such as radio failure and general emergencies and things like that. Those can be transmitted on this particular one as well. Below that we've got the exhaust gas temperatures for the two engines, one for the left, one for the right, and then again we'd look at those, check those are in the green range and they're showing a stable indication. And then over to the right you've got the gyro pressure gauge, which again that should be in a range of 4.5 to 5.2. Below that you've got the doll's eyes for the left and the right, so we're looking at that to check that those lights are out and it's within the operating range, because that controls the instrumentation, or I should say various instruments, the gyro pressure that controls those. So that's important that that's working properly so that we've got the correct instrumentation. Below that, should just mention to the right of the throttle body there, you've got the friction control for the actual throttles, so we can set how free and easy they do move. Usually we'd leave that in one particular setting. We've got some further light panels there, so the panel lights and the radio lights, those controls, so we can operate those to different settings depending on whether it's night flying, etc. Below that we've got the fuel flow gauge as well, another one of the methods of seeing that we've got the correct fuel flow, and that would form part of the checks. Moving over to the right, you've got the other pilot's control as well, and also below that you've got the fuse panel, so you've got all the different fuses there. I won't go into all of those because the video will go on forever, but you can see for yourself there's quite a few fuses there. And then above you've got the altimeter as well, such an important instrument, so you've got that one for the other pilot as well. Okay, moving down, we've got the alternate air controls there. Again, they're shaped quite easy to see, and that just gives us an alternate form of air as well. If there was an issue, we'd usually have that off, but it just gives us another option as well. Below that we've got the cowl flaps. Again, we would adjust those as 3 settings, so they can either be open when we're on the ground and we want to keep the engine temperatures going to rise quite rapidly because there's not much airflow going past the aircraft, and then when we're going up to altitude where it's much colder temperature, then we can set those so that they can be either partly closed or fully closed, so that the engine doesn't cool too much, and again that would form part of the checks to check that those are open on the ground as well. Moving further back, we've got the lever there. You see that controls the flaps, the 3 stages of flaps we have on this aircraft. So at the moment when the lever's down, that's showing that the wings are clean and the flaps are retracted. As we're coming into land and we need to deploy more flaps, then we would pull that up to go through the different stages as required. Moving back, we've also got to the left there, we've got a trim wheel, and that basically we've got an electric trim on the control panel, and we could also manually turn that wheel, and basically that just takes the control pressures off the control column. So when we've got, if we're in, say for instance, level flight, and we want to set that so that we would basically set a particular attitude with the control column, and then we would either manually or electronically adjust that wheel, and that would mean that it would take the control pressures that we're having to put through that control column off, so that the aircraft's in trim, and that takes off some of the pressure that we've got of controlling it. Similar in a way to an autopilot, I suppose, but we do need to continually look at that and monitor it and adjust it. Okay, moving back further forward, we've got the again, rudder trim. This is a manual trim. We've not got an electronic rudder for this, but we wouldn't really use this as much, but again we can make minor adjustments. to make sure that the aircraft's in balance by moving that wheel left and right. And you can see the gauge there as well, which is when it's neutral, and we may need some left or right rudder as appropriate. Again, moving backwards, we've got the fuel, so we can have at the moment both are in the on-off position, which is as they would be when we're stationary. We can also have them both forward in the on position, or we can have them cross-feeding from one engine to the other, so they could be in the cross-feed position as well. Moving backwards, we've got the heater fan and the heater defrost switches. And then there's also an overheat indication as well. That red would show that the heater's overheating. And again, the actual rear would say we've got the controls. So this controls the actual temperature from cold to warm, and also shows the air intake from closed to open. And again, that would be part of the checks on landing. After you've landed, you check that that's open and the fan's left running for a certain period of time, just to check that it doesn't overheat when we've not got airflow going past it. So those are the basic checks, the basic instruments. Obviously all of these instruments I could go into in a lot more detail if required. The altimeter, there we go in the middle with all its different settings and the way that works, and the dangers and hazards with it as well if it's not set correctly, especially if you're in instrument flight. That could warrant a video by its own right, as also would be the airspeed indicator, all the ranges of speed there, and the importance of different airspeeds for flying. So yeah, hope you found that useful. It's a good little video just showing where everything is, and it just helps as a little reminder for the familiarisation for myself as well. So yeah, hope you found that useful. Bye for now. Okay, it's a particularly windy day here, and all of the aircrafts are being positioned to put them into the wind, just in anticipation of the strong winds, the weather system that's moving in.